Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us for the first edition of Batch Workshops. We're starting now. Our guests are already on standby. Just a quick intro about myself. My name is Susanna, Professor Daniel, and I lead the content team at Batch. So today we're doing Batch Workshops, and Batch Workshops is basically a series, a series of conversations with leading industry experts in motion design. And this is designed, created to help, especially up and coming motion designers, know how to become better at what they do. And today we have three guests joining us who are doing excellence in their fields, respectively, as motion designers. And I'll be introducing them shortly, starting with Andrew. Andrew is a motion designer with 10 years plus of experience working with creative agencies, marketing teams, and video departments. He currently stays in Arizona, USA. And before, Andrew has lived and worked in Japan for 6 years. He currently has and grew his YouTube channel. Hi, Andrew. And grew his YouTube channel from zero to about 120K subscribers. So we have Andrew joining us today for this session. He's going to be starting first. We also have Lankai, who is an awesome motion designer from Ghana, and Ebube, who is in Lagos, Nigeria, a 3D motion designer. Started out in 2020 and so far has grown to become one of the best in the motion design industry in Africa. So shout out to everyone here and shout out to our guest, Andrew. Hi, how are you feeling?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So take it away. Tell us, you ready for your presentation?
Oh, yep, absolutely. Feel free to share my screen. There we go. And let me make that a little bigger. Awesome. So basically, I'm just going to run through my creation process from getting the idea all the way to the final render. And this is the example project that we'll be following along with, which I made yesterday. And nothing too crazy going on, but hopefully just going over the whole process will add some insight for a few people. So here is the basic outline of my process. We start with a concept or often a brief, depending, and then we move into a discovery phase. This is all pre-production before we've opened any Adobe programs. In the discovery phase, we figure out more or less what the look and feel of the project will be. Then we write a script and move on to create a storyboard from the script. So with our script and storyboard, then we know what we're going to make. And then we actually go and open up an Adobe program. I like to work in Illustrator to do my style frames. And then I take those style frames into After Effects and do all the animation. And then last, of course, we render it all out. So the concept or brief, the idea, where does this come from? So if it's a paid project, then that's pretty easy. The person hiring me will tell me what we're going to make, and I will aid in that process. But if it's a personal project, it can be kind of tricky to figure out what to make. So I have a system that I use that works pretty reliably for deciding on a personal project. First, I'll look at work that inspires me, and usually this is not some big arduous exploration through the internet. This is me probably scrolling on Instagram, and if I see a top studio or creator that I follow post something cool, then maybe I'll look at their website to see if there's a case study or any behind the scenes information, and I'll analyze that piece, and I'll pick one, maybe two aspects, maybe just their treatment, like how they, maybe just their color scheme, or maybe something technical that I'm trying to figure out how they did that. And using that one aspect of that one project, I'll create a project based on it. So for this project, I decided that we're going to have a credit card that turns into a locked phone. And it's going to be 3 seconds long. It'll be 1 by 1, 1080 by 1080, and 24 frames a second. And yes, I didn't put this in the steps because it's a very brief moment, but brief moment in the process. But I always create a new project folder as soon as I know I'm going to be making a project. And I have a folder template, just a folder full of blank folders on my hard drive that I copy and paste and rename. And I do this every single project. It's always the same. And since we're talking about my process, I wanted to highlight this because it does save, 2-3 minutes, so I don't have to recreate this folder structure every single time. So that simple, having a template folder, you can customize it to your own workflow, but this is mine. I have a O1AE folder where I put all the After Effects, file in, and then I have an assets folder with a subfolder for all the different types of media that might go into the project, so I have a place to also collect reference and put the storyboards all in one place. And then I have essentially a render folder. I call it out, and that's where I put the different file formats that we render out. So if anybody's watching out there that doesn't have a system in place to quickly start a new project, I'd encourage you to do something like this. Okay, moving on. Now that we know what we're going to make, we have a concept or a brief. We're going to turn a credit card into a locked phone. We move into the discovery phase, which is just kind of a vague term, actually, that means what's it going to look like. We need to define the style. So the treatment and colors, we need to determine those. And usually I get these from pulling reference on other pieces that I find online that I think will fit the vibe of the project that I'm making. So the inspiration, I'll pull these from inspirational works. I often just go to the Adobe stock website and type in relevant terms and then scroll until I find images or treatments that look similar. They have one or two aspects that I want to use in the project. Then there's the Behance boards and also Pinterest, which honestly, the Behance and Pinterest, I don't go to that much. I have to really come up dry on the stock sites or other inspirational works to go there, but they're good sources. And I create a mood board from this. So here's the mood board that I created for this project. On the left-hand side, these are actually all from Ordinary Folk, which is my favorite studio. Some of their Webflow pieces, I think SAP is this one over here on the, can you see my mouse? Yes, okay. SAP is this one on the left. So I really liked their gradients. It's kind of a clean, minimal, geometric look. And then on the right-hand side, we have actual imagery that I'm going to reference in the design in Illustrator. So now that we know what it's going to look and feel like, we need to write a script for what is actually going to be seen. And in some cases, if there's voiceover or music, heard through the video. So this is the script I came up with. In board 1, we have a credit card on screen. In board 2, the card rotates and morphs into a phone. And then we finish in board 3 with the phone coming to rest, displaying a lock icon. So this is a very short piece, not a very complicated script, but this is the sort of thing that I would write out before I even start creating imagery for this project. So with our script, then time to make a storyboard. So my storyboards, here is the actual storyboard I made for this project from my sketchbook. I'll go line by line through the script, and I'll just quickly draw out what I imagine could work on the screen. And then that helps me flow into the transitions to get to the next frame. And I don't always show clients these storyboards. If it's a client project, then I might clean these up, or even depending on the project and the client, bring them into Illustrator and make maybe a little bit more detailed storyboard. But just for my own personal work, this is usually good enough. These represent what I want to happen. And I know quickly, this process of using a sketchbook and not really caring how good the drawings are helps me quickly get my ideas down on paper. Okay, so with a script and a storyboard in place, then it's time to open Illustrator. Let me see, I have that open here. Okay, so we are in, looking at the screen. Yep, okay. We are in Adobe Illustrator right now, where I do 90% plus of my design work. And I've laid out 3 different artboards for each of the 3 different frames, and I put the script above it. So we don't have time, I think, in this workshop to actually push the buttons and design it. So I will just go through how I've designed this. So in the layers panel, I'll just make some of these visible. I put a background, credit card, shape, and this is essentially, I'll switch to outline mode. This is the first frame. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty straightforward project, but I did want to just mention that I keep everything on a separate layer. And if you're just a static designer, or you're designing for static end products like social banners or something that's not animated, you might have a different workflow. But because I know this is going to be brought into After Effects, then it's very important to keep anything that I want to be able to move by itself on its own layer and clearly labeled. So for example, the background, it's not just labeled background, it's labeled O1 because it's going to be in the first shot, O1 background. Then I have in this transitional frame, which I put a T because I'm not actually going to pull this into After Effects. I just wanted to get an idea so I can reference it later while I'm animating what this would look like. The T is for transition. And then last, we have the third frame, which is the locked phone screen. So with this, now that this is basically fully designed except for color, which I'll talk about in just a second, I can pull this directly into After Effects in a couple different ways. I can either save this Illustrator file and import it into After Effects, and all the layers should be preserved. Or I like to use Overlord by Battle Axe. That's my favorite way. The reason is because this will create shape layers in After Effects which don't live in the project panel, so it keeps your project panel just a little less cluttered. And also, if you need to pass that After Effects file on to another motion designer, it's one less file that you have to make sure stays linked and collected with the project. So I'm just going to backtrack real quick to the fact that these are all in black and white. I don't always design, I don't always stop at black and white in Illustrator. Sometimes I will apply colors, but recently I've gotten more and more into this workflow where I design everything in Illustrator in black and white, and then in After Effects, I can apply different color correction effects like CC toner or tint, sometimes fill, I guess, and color it in a much more flexible way in After Effects. So in this case, that's what I've done. And I'm going to switch to After Effects. Okay, so here we are in After Effects, and I have a bunch of pre-prepared compositions, so we can just take a little snapshot of what each step looks like. So to pull these graphics into After Effects, you can just click on, make sure it's selected, click on a piece of the graphic, go into Overlord, click the push button, and it appears. And one thing that I want to point out, because I have multiple artboards, and this is a common issue that I see on discussion forums online, because I have multiple artboards, if I then select the artboard for this frame, or select the background for this frame, and I push that into After Effects, we can see that it doesn't quite show up. It's actually, oh, wait, it did. Through the power. Okay, here we go. Let me undo that. So here is our first background, and I'm going to use something more obvious like the phone. So we have this phone, but this artboard is highlighted. So if I select the phone and I push it into After Effects, it shows up way off on the right because our active artboard was board 1. So in this case, all you have to do is make sure that your active artboard, that the art you're trying to push to After Effects is in the active artboard. And now I can go to my layers panel, select the phone, push it into After Effects. And also, one nice thing about Overlord is that it preserves the layer names. So here I know this O1 background is the background for my first shot, and this O2 phone will be in my second shot. So once I've imported all those, we're going to fast forward cooking show style. Once I've imported all those, here they all are. They're all still in black and white, and I've kind of roughly timed where they're going to be. This is a 3-second composition, 3-second shot. So I've made the transition right at the halfway point. How are we doing on time? 10:16. Okay. So this is when I would actually start coloring it, because I know this is going to be the final deliverable is going to be out of After Effects. And if I need to make changes to the design, that will also happen in After Effects. I like to, or it would be easiest if that happened in After Effects. I like to use this sort of workflow. So let's just go ahead and start coloring a few of these. Here we have this chip. So I will usually go in and I will use CC Toner. CC Toner, it's very similar to Tint, but we can see that Tint only has 2 options. CC Toner has up to 5 options, a little more flexible. So I've gotten in the habit of using CC Toner instead of Tint. And I also like to use the script called Ray Dynamic Color. And what that does, I'll just show you right here. So here I have my CC Toner selected. Can we see that? Here we have the CC Toner highlights color property selected, and we're going to color it yellow, for example. So now that we've colored this yellow, and we'll just color this red, for example. The beauty of Ray Dynamic Color is that if it applies these colors to these properties using expressions that link back to a hidden composition created by the script. And so now if I go in and want to change one of these colors globally across the whole project, then it's as easy as finding that color in the Ray Dynamic Color generated composition and changing it here. And then let's go back to where we applied it. And now it is blue here. And that's a really quick way also to create multiple different looks, multiple different color schemes, color combinations. And so I'll just go through and I'll start applying CC Toner to the different elements like this, CC Toner. And if anybody, to apply CC Toner, you can go under Effect and then Color Correction CC Toner right here. You can right click on the Effect Controls panel and it's in the same place. Color Correction CC Toner, or with the layer selected, if you have the free plugin from Video Copilot called FX Console installed, which I highly recommend, then there is a shortcut that you can hit, and then you can type in, it brings up this dialog, and you type in the name of the effect, hit enter, and it applies it. So just a little one way to save a few seconds. So I'll go through, and what are we looking at? The numbers. So one interesting thing about After Effects is you can't actually highlight the property from the Effect Controls panel. You have to double click it, and then in the timeline panel, select it. And with it selected in the timeline panel, then you can go ahead and click on Ray Dynamic Colors. Let's just do a few more. We'll do the planet, CC Toner, set matte at the bottom. You don't have to put set mattes at the bottom, but I just like to keep them as low as possible. All right, so highlights, planet. All right, so you can see how this is taking shape. And I'm gonna flash forward again, now that we have started colorizing this, to the fully colorized version. And this is all with CC Toner. So if I went in and I wanted to change one of these colors to something else, we'll just make this an obnoxious green. You can see that it's changed it. I guess that was the only place that color was applied, but it's changed it in the main comp. And I'm going to go back and undo that because it looks terrible. Okay, so now that we've got this design pretty much finalized in After Effects, the next step isn't exactly animation. I always like to do an animatic, and an animatic is like a rough draft of your animation where you're just trying to get the timing of your transitions blocked in. And if you have voiceover and music, this is especially helpful. The big motions that you want to do, you try to quickly communicate all that without spending all the time massaging the keyframes, making sure the motion is perfect. Stuff that might change, we want to try to avoid doing at this phase. So we know that we want this credit card to rotate and become this phone. So the way I have this set up, I have these orange layers. They all are the credit card layers and the background, that whole scene, and they are parented to this control null right here. So I could, oops, that's a mask. Wait a second. There we go. So I could rotate this null here, but because I'm going to be transitioning into this phone, which I also want to probably continue that motion, that's called a match cut, continue that motion through the transition. I'm going to use this master null, which I'm linking both scenes to. They're parented to that. And I'm going to lay a rotation keyframe. So let me undo that. So you can hit R to pull up rotation, or A for anchor point, P for position, R for rotation, S for scale, T for opacity. So you could, to lay a rotation keyframe here, you can hit R and then click the stopwatch. A faster way that just saves 1 or 2 clicks is, if you're on Windows at least, Shift Alt and then one of those keyboard shortcuts. So in this case, R will, I had every single layer selected there. Shift Alt R will lay a keyframe on one of those transform properties. So that's what I kind of get into the habit of doing. So I have this rotation set to 0, and I think we're going to end up wanting it to be something like this. So 90, yep. And how many frames is this? Shift page down to go backwards 10 frames. We'll try that for now. So shift page up to go forward 10 frames. And so here we have this credit card is going to be rotating. And with it fully rotated, I will link the phone, the null that controls the phone. So now they both move in tandem. So this is a pretty good, we're just starting to block in the big motions. What else are we going to want to do? And I'm not going to be easing any keyframes in this animatic phase. I don't want to waste any time with that. Just as quickly as possible to get my big concepts down to see if the timing works. That's what I'm looking for. Actually, let's just make this just a touch quicker. And when the easing is applied, we'll be able to get that timing a little bit better. The other big things that we're going to want to do is move this chip to the middle and expand this planet to kind of, well, I'll do that right now. So I'm going to hit Shift-Alt-S to lay a scale keyframe, and also Shift-Alt-P to lay a position keyframe. So moving ahead just to right here so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to move this in the middle, zero out the Y, and then I'm going to scale up until it fills the whole card and move that over. So that will kind of help it'll help reinforce that there's a change happening. And also this gradient that's now covering the credit card sort of looks like the gradient that is in the screen of the phone. Okay, so looks like we're at 24 minutes. For the sake of time, I think I'm going to skip ahead to what the animatic looks like once I've finished doing it. So here is the animatic that I made for this project. And it looks pretty good. We get a pretty good sense of what's happening. All the keyframes are linear keyframes. And if I select all the layers and hit U, then you will reveal or hide any keyframes for selected layers. So you can see all of these are linear keyframes. So after we've got the animatic done and everybody in the chain has approved it, then we go into the actual animation phase where we start finessing the easing. So I'm going to hit Shift F3 with these keyframes selected. I guess they don't have to be selected. You could just have the property selected. And I'm going to select these keyframes here in the graph editor. Graph editor is, what did I do? There we are. Graph editor is my favorite part of After Effects. This is where all the magic happens. This is how everything, all the motion starts to look really, really good. So I just hit F9 to easy ease these linear keyframes, and let's take a look. And just because this rotation is only impacting the rotation of the scene into this transition, I'm going to go ahead and turn off, or I'm just going to solo the card and the phone so that we can really get a sense of what this motion is. That looks pretty good. It would be nice if there was a little bit more of a snap. So I'm going to select this keyframe and hang on, Shift F3. So our transition point is here with no layers selected. I'm going to put my playhead, my CTI, where I want to set a marker and hit the star on the number pad to lay down a marker. And now when I go back into the graph editor, I can always see this is where the transition is happening. And in match cuts, which is what we're doing, these look very similar, but they are slightly different, the credit card and the phone. In match cuts, you want to make your cut on the fastest point in the motion. So I know that in my graph editor, I want the steepest part of this graph to be right in line with that marker. So I'm going to go ahead and these are, so when handles in the graph editor, if handles are not connected, you can hold Alt. So you get this curve editor sort of V pointy tool, and then that will reconnect them. And then they'll be connected after forevermore. Unless you hold Alt again, then they will be disconnected. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to just go ahead and start finessing these keyframes, this interpolation, so that the steepest part is right in line with that. And here, so I want this anticipation move as it rotates to the left. I want this anticipation move to hold a little bit. That's why I put these two keyframes, which are very similar values, but one is slightly less than the other. So it will turn, but kind of hesitate. So it kind of has that momentum shift moment. I'm going to go ahead and point these directly at each other and make this just a little more extreme. I almost never just leave the easy ease interpolation values in the graph editor as the default. I almost always tweak them at least a little bit. I kind of like that to happen faster. And after I do this, I will probably wrap up this demonstration, just because this is almost certainly very painful to watch. But this is the process when we get to final animation that this is what the process looks like. Yeah, it's still not quite fast enough. Let's just hang on, just checking my messages. Okay, good. I really want that to snap so that we feel it whip into the motion and kind of hold there while the momentum shifts. That's pretty good. That's not bad. So then I'd go through all the other keyframes, and it's really tempting not to do that right now, but since I am live on stream and consuming other people's life, I'm going to hold off for the most part. Okay, how's that? That's pretty good. Okay, jumping all the way ahead, now we have this final animation where it rotates to the side, and a couple things to notice are that here is the rotation of the whole scene, and we have this chip that moves to the left, but in the interpolation of these, although they start at the same time, the chip takes slightly longer, so it will feel like it is motivated by the motion of the card. That offset motion adds just a little bit of visual variety, instead of if they were to move at exactly the same time with the exact same easing, they would feel very connected. Let me turn off my guides. There we go. It's a very subtle thing, but the fact that we offset these so the chip moves just a little bit more after the motion of the card stops rotating, that overshoot, that follow through adds a bit more realism, in my opinion. And it's little details like that, like this, that if you apply them to all the different elements with offset timing, anticipation, overshoots, all the animation principles really make motion stand out from the crowd, because it takes time. Tweaking the graph editor, changing timing, just nudging keyframes, it all takes a lot of time. So I believe I was supposed to be done around the 30 mark, and here we are. So I'm going to switch back to my presentation. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I have been completely ignoring the chat. Shout out to everybody who's ever managed a stream. There's a lot of windows going on here. Yeah, Susanna.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much. That was really insightful. While we wait for everyone else to ask their questions, I have a few questions for you, starting from your session and everything you shown today. First is, what are your favorite After Effects scripts?
My favorite. Can you say it one more time?
Your favorite After Effects script?
The
Did you get
presets.
that question?
Hang on.
Your favorite After Effects scripts? Can you hear me?
Oh, this. Yeah, yeah. Oh, so let me switch back. I'm still sharing my screen. Let me switch back to After Effects. This right here, this screen, this layout that we're looking at is not the workspace that I usually use in After Effects. And because I've made my screen just a little bit. It's like 200% resolution to hopefully make things more visible on the screen. It'd be hard to switch to the one that I actually use. But I took a screenshot, so maybe this is worse. I don't know if this is worse, but here is the workspace that I usually animate with. And so my favorite After Effects tools, the third-party tools, Flow. Flow basically brings the graph editor to a panel, and so you don't have to open the graph editor. It saves you those clicks. You just select keyframes and then visually can tweak the interpolation. I use Keystone a lot more and more because it automates a lot of keyframe management, multi-step keyframe management tasks like duplicating, aligning, duplicate and flip. I use their constant. They make the interpolation between two keyframes constant. So yeah, Flow, Keystone, Ray Dynamic Color. I use that all the time. K-Bar is another one that I can't speak highly enough about, where it's essentially making your own custom macros and shortcut buttons in After Effects. For rendering, which I actually didn't render, but I'll just go ahead. We are in After Effects here. We have some After Effects Inception going on. So to render, you can send your composition to the render queue and set your settings and all that, but unless I'm rendering out a final deliverable, like a final QuickTime, if it's just a draft, or if it's just going on social media and I know it's only going to be an MP4, the end product is an MP4, I use Anubis by Battleaxe. It's really customizable. Especially make sure you watch the tutorials, but they have all these different ways you can assign tokens to file names. You can change which output module you're using. I haven't done side-by-side tests, but I feel like it's quicker and higher quality with lower file size than the native render engine that's inside of After Effects, which is just a stripped down version of the Adobe Media Encoder render engine. And I'm not 100% sure why that is. I think they might just use slightly different encoding code, but yeah, Anubis, can't speak highly enough about that. Some others are Ease Copy, which is a pay what you want script. I'm trying to think. I'm sure that there are several that I'm missing. Basically, anything that Battleaxe makes, or is that Battleaxe or Zach Lovett, I usually buy those products without even like considering them too heavily, because I know that they're going to be really, really useful. Yeah, that you asked me what okay. I answered the question. I thought for a second I got sidetracked.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank
wow.
you so much, Andrew.
Yeah,
I have another question for you, but before then, I'm going to. Okay, here, this is a question for you from someone in the comments. Professionally Incorrect wants to know, how often do you crash on the After Effects pillow on your couch? Okay. He says, we know how much After Effects crashes on us. How often do you crash on the After Effects pillow on your couch? I'm hoping that you got that question right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got that pillow specifically to cry into when After Effects crashes. That's like my After Effects cry pillow. Yeah, so probably I'd say a couple times a day. Yeah, it gets a lot of use. I should wash that sometime.
Sure. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Batch Workshops, and we've been speaking with Andrew. Andrew is a motion designer with over 10 years of experience designing and creating If you're just joining in, welcome. You can check the link in the description to join the batch workshop, to join the batch Discord channel. We are sharing and building communities for motion designers from around the world. Quickly, Andrew, I'm going to ask you one more question. Why do you work from grayscale to color?
Oh, yeah. So for me, I don't always do that. But because I'm going to be moving all these design elements into After Effects, if there is a change to it's just a little bit more flexible. That's the short answer. But if it's for a client project, or I guess for a personal project, and there needs to be a change to the colors, then it's much easier to be able to make that in After Effects instead of change it in Illustrator, have to re-import that file or those layers or those shapes, and then reconnect all the keyframes and everything. So it's just a little bit more flexible. But if it was for a client project, then most likely, almost certainly, I would deliver to them style frames that are fully colored. That grayscale part of the workflow is just for my convenience. But those style frames, they might, if the project feels like, if it feels like the right project, then those style frames that are fully colored that I send to the client might actually be exported from After Effects. And that's just maybe a unique thing to my workflow, but I find it much more flexible to dial in colors that way. If it's a really complicated illustration from an illustrator, like I didn't create the design, I don't expect it to be grayscale. I don't expect to use that workflow at all, though.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. Do you think it's necessary to learn expressions? Do you think it's necessary?
Necessary. No. I mean, so I am a diehard expression enthusiast. I will almost always spend more time making an expression. Like I will spend 2 hours to make an expression that saved me 5 minutes if I have the time, just because I enjoy that. But is it absolutely essential for you to be successful in your motion design goals? No, it's not. I do think that once you start learning expressions, especially expressions like linear, I use split all the time to take parts of different file of layer names and feed those. Like I'll end a layer name in a number, and then I will use the split expression to take that number and feed it into another part of the expression. Once you start learning about expressions, you'll see how much time it can save you. So it's not essential, but I highly, highly recommend it. Man, there's 34 people watching. Jeez. Thank you, guys.
There are a lot of people on the call. This has been really insightful so far. And there's one more question I'm asking you before I look through the comments and take a question from anyone who's watching. So what's your process for match cuts?
For match cuts? Did you say match cuts?
Yeah.
Okay, so process for match cuts is, let me get back into After Effects here. Process for match cuts is, hang on. Yeah, this will work. So I try to get the designs as close as possible between the frames that are the frames that sandwich the match cut. We can see here the credit card. It's been, or in this, we'll go to the final animation. The credit card has grown just a little bit lengthwise to be more like the shape of the phone. So the designs match closer. And the fact that then everything on screen is more or less the same shape or in the same place will help with that sleight of hand when we just make the hard cut. And like I said before, the other really important thing, in my opinion, about match cuts is that I might not have even done it here. Ooh. It should be the fastest part of the motion curve happens right at the transition. And in this case, I guess I didn't quite adhere to that, but when things are moving quickly on screen, it's easier to hide bigger changes in animation. And that's why we would want to match cut right on the fastest part of the motion. Similar to as I did here, but not, I guess I probably should have had this maybe one frame over. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Andrew. There's someone with a question in the comments, so I'm going to try to read this out. Ajibade Mustafa wants to know, when do you decide to use 24 or 60 frame rates or other kind of frame rates?
A 24, 60, 30. So if the client has a preference, like the final application has like the specs are defined, it needs to be 30 frames per second for their end application, then of course I use that. If it's just me, I don't think I've ever animated something in 60 frames a second, to be honest. 24 frames per second is the cinematic film look. And because I learned animation at 24 frames a second, I'm really used to thinking that way. I know that 12 frames is, half a second. And I feel like different motions, I have a better sense of how many frames they should take. So I personally just default to 24. But yeah, it also depends on the end look that you want. If you want something that's a little bit more stop motion or handmade feeling, then you might want a lower frame rate, like 12 or 10, depending. But yeah, so I guess how do I decide? If it's just me, I use 24. If it is for client and they have a preference, then I use that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. It has been a delight listening to you for like the past 40 minutes now. This has been such an interesting session. Everyone go check out Andrew on Instagram or LinkedIn, connect and see more of his works and catch up. Thank you so much, Andrew. It was nice to speak with you today. Hi everyone. This is Batch Workshops, and today we have been speaking with Andrew Martson, the motion designer, and he has, in the past few minutes or 40 minutes, shared his process with us and walked us through his creative process and all of that. And so we will be having Ebube join us for the next session. Hi, Ebube, how are you feeling? Hi, can you hear me, Ebube?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm feeling good.
Hi,
Can you
how
hear
are you
me?
feeling? Yeah, I
Yeah,
can.
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right.
Yeah,
Thank you very
awesome.
much.
Thank you for joining
Okay.
us today.
You are most welcome.
Yeah, I want to do a quick intro before you start your session because a few more people joined in after I did the first intro. So if you're just joining in, this is Ebube, and Ebube is a motion designer. He started out in 2020 and exploring 3D motion design since 2020, and since then he has grown to become one of the best in his game, doing excellent, amazing work all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. So we're going to be listening to Ebube next. He'll be sharing his presentation with us, and we'll be seeing what it's like creating with Ebube. Hi, Ebube, you're next up.
Hi. Awesome. Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, found it. Okay. All right. We just want to be sure if everyone can see my screen. Um, okay. Great. Sorry, I just like to check. Susanna, can everyone see my screen? I think.
I can see you, but not your screen yet. I can't see your screen yet.
Okay. I am guessing. Just give me a second. So apparently I'm having trouble sharing my screen. Okay.
I think we lost Ebube for a minute there. We'll be having him join us back. Hi guys, so it seems Ebube is having a little connectivity issue, so we're just going to give him a few more minutes to come back up. Thank you guys for being here and joining in. It's amazing doing this with all of you. I think he's back on. Hi Ebube, can you share your screen now?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Great. Hi everyone. My name is Bill, like I'm being introduced. I'm a motion designer. And I started motion design, especially 3D motion design as far back as 2020. But I've been learning about this for a while, so I'm trying to do like a formal introduction. In 2013, I started out as a photographer. I used to take pictures, and somewhere in 2015, I started learning about motion design. In 2016, I dropped out of school to study motion design full time. So I was studying chemical engineering in school, and it wasn't entering, it wasn't clicking, as they say. And between 2016 to 2019, I spent a lot of time trying to learn about motion design, everything around design, and just to figure out what design really was about. And from then till present day, I have worked with different brands to help them tell their unique story. So my presentation today is really going into my frustrations as a motion designer. Basically, between my 2016 to 2019, all of the frustrations I faced as a motion designer, and I put it all together into like 12 lessons that I learned as a motion designer. I really wanted to do like some cool, like Andrew did, like some cool, show like some cool 3D renders and like do some practical stuff. But I realized that may not really have so much time. But I feel like these lessons that I have put together, they would kind of help with, especially if you're a young new motion designer, this will really help out a lot. All right, so my first lesson is motion design is still design. I think this was a big lesson for me because I started motion design with After Effects, and I thought that for it to be a motion designer, it started and ended in After Effects. But I realized very quickly that design was a very big part of motion design, and so something that I get a lot from beginners is them asking if they should learn graphic design or visual design. Motion design is still design. It's just with motion, like with movements. That's really what it is. And at the foundation of that design, are star frames, right? And if you know anything about star frames are basically they are really design frames that you create right before you start your the animation or production process, of your animation. And I think it's very important and to have star frames because while it's okay to just go with the flow, in some cases, especially when it comes to client work, it's very important to have star frames. I have a bunch of star frames that I collected, there about 3 or 4 of them. And I just wanted to show you how having a star frame, especially in terms of design, really helps you get a sense of the mood of what you're working on, right? If you're working on your frames, especially maybe you're working on them in After Effects, or especially if you're working on them in After Effects, or maybe if you're a 3D person and you're working directly in your 3D software, you may lose out or you may miss the big picture. Working on your designs first and working on a star frame allows you to really see a grand view of what the your your piece is about, and it allows you correct things earlier rather than later. So these are some of my favorite star frames that I have. You can see that they're really well designed. I'm not really going to go into breaking them down or showing how they work. However, if you want to see more star frames like this, or you want to break down other people's work, there's a site called the Art of the Title, and it's a very, very great resource for finding, especially title sequences, title design. You see a lot of star frames that you can break down and work around. My second lesson were rules, is basically rules and principles, and really the difference between them. So a lot of us know about the 12 principles of animation. Frank Thomas and Rick Johnston, they created this set of principles that basically guides how every animator should work. So this was during the early Disney time. And while this was one of the first things I learned, I quickly started realizing that when it came to motion design, this really didn't serve more. They served more as rules and guides rather than principles. And like I mentioned in my first lesson, that motion design is still design. It felt like there was still a lot of pieces that were missing in terms of the principles of motion design. So I now take these 12 principles of animation. I take them as rules, like I mentioned, and this is controversial. This is really up to debate. This is kind of controversial territory. But I took a course earlier in my career. I took a course by Jorge R. Canedo, J.R. Canest, and the title is on Learn Squared, and the title of the course was motion design. Basically, it was really an intro to motion design, and he laid out 10. He called them principles, but he also did say that they are kind of like rules, right? And I basically think of them as a process or as a guide for working on actual animation, right? Because there are some of these, when you think about a principle, they're usually like foundations for your work. But whenever I think about these rules, for example, it usually comes to me more as a process, right? When you're animating, you kind of ask yourself, does this have the right time, the right spacing, or is the easing really great? Does it have really great? Does it show weight or mass? Can we show anticipation? Acts. These things are like, it's basically the 12 principles of animation, but the way I see them more as rules and as guides. However, I consider the ones that are highlighted in red is what I consider like very important, meaning I don't think you should go animating anything without having to consider each of these principles or rules, as I will call them. So what do I refer to as principles? Basically, the principles are really design principles, right? Like contrast, balance, emphasis, pattern, hierarchy, repetition, rhythm, movement or direction, variety, and unity. And you may ask how this would apply with motion. And I would really love to really break down all of this, but because of time, I will just really skim over it. And the idea is that when you think about normal design, you already do things like contrast, right? You make something maybe a separate color from the rest so that you can identify it, right? Or you try to visually balance like your composition. The same thing happens with motion. The additional element here is just movement, right? It's kind of like you using movement to emphasize either that principle, basically, whether it's emphasis. So when you're talking about emphasis, you may make a certain element a certain color, and the rest just have similar color to be able to give emphasis to that. When we're talking about hierarchy, you make something bigger, or you make it more flashy, or you make it move more than the rest, so that people look directly at that object or element. So I tried to break down. This is supposed to play. I tried to break down one of them just because of time, and this is basically the idea of contrast. Sorry, I think this should loop. Please excuse me. This should loop. Okay, sorry. So it's really to bring an idea of contrast. And here we can see, especially with this first example, you can see how when we look at the shapes on the outside, they're moving constantly, right? And then the one on the inside is moving like he has a very different movement to that. It allows you notice that compared to the rest, and you literally know that that one is kind of, what's the word? It is the action that it makes that causes a reaction from the others. So it gives the one in center, much more attention than the rest. Especially if you're trying to create something that is showing attention. And on this other side, we have two shapes. And this is I showed this because especially when I work with like client work and you have to do like comparison, you may have two things, two objects, two items to compare, and it's always very, for me, I always feel like in order for you to give, if you're trying to reference one, then it's very important to kind of like exaggerate it in some way. And the only way and one of the ways to do that is, in this case, is size. It could also be color. It doesn't have to be size. It could be color, it could be texture, it could be the pattern, it could be lines, right? The idea is that when you're thinking about contrast, or when you're thinking about principles, like I mentioned earlier, is that you kind of bring in those design principles like you already know them from your design understanding, and then you kind of add motion to them. How can I, show balance by moving items, maybe either from left to right, and so on. So that's really it about rules and principles. Simple versus complex. I think this was a very hard lesson for me to learn, because every single time I started a project, I always wanted the project to be very, very complex. I wanted to have every single thing I could throw at it at the very beginning. And when you don't take into consideration some criteria, it's very, very, very easy for you to lose out on, or for you to even miss the mark in total, not to be able to hit your goals. So when you talk about simple versus complex, there are a lot of elements that you could either make simple, like it's basically a scale. I wouldn't say that it is you have to choose one or the other. It's kind of like a scale, if I put it. And some of the elements that you could consider for a simple versus complex situation is things like story. The story you're trying to tell. Is it a very complex story, or is it a very simple to understand story? Right. Transitions. Would you want to do like a match cut, like Andrew showed us in his workshop, or would you want to do like a very dynamic transition where you're going through object design? So we're talking about characters, object shapes, right? Do you want to make them very simple characters, or do you want to make them very complex characters? And in the next frame, I'll kind of go over some of the criteria that you should consider before you make a decision between simple versus complex. And I speak about this in relation to how I learned about this concept. So the same thing with storyboard, animation, and even sound design, right? You always want to decide from the beginning, and that's how I see it, that you want to make either of these elements, either very simple, whether you want it towards the simple side or towards the complex side. Some of the criteria to consider when you are when you're trying to think about what should be simple or should be complex is, one, time. Do you have enough time to pull off a very complex story or transition or character design or animation or sound design, right? If you do not have the time, I will usually say go towards the simple side. And if you have enough time to do so, it's always good to stay between the middle, having a mix of both simple and complex, or going straight to being very complex. Two, if you're working on a client project, the budget is also very important to note, because if the client doesn't have a lot of budget, you wouldn't want to go for very complex ideas, because one, you may exhaust your resources, and you may burn out because you're trying to squeeze in or trying to figure out a way to like get that complex idea into a tiny budget. So if you have a small budget, try to stay within like a simple side of things. And if you have a lot of budget and also a lot of time, usually you want to go towards the complex side of things. The third criteria is the brand style or objective. regardless of whether you want to create like very complex characters or very simple characters, if the brand requires that you go simple, then it's very important that you respect the brand style or the objectives of the brand. And if the brand has very complex elements, then you need to also respect that as well. I think the challenge here is how you can create a balance between what should be simple and what should be complex, especially when we talk about the elements, right? It's not a case where once you decide to go simple, then every single thing can be simple. Sometimes you could have very simple designs, so characters, objects, shapes, and then you want to have complex transitions. And I think that's really how it is in most cases, where you have like simple design and then complex transitions, and then the other way around, where you have like very complex designs and then you really do like very simple transitions, match cuts, pans, zooms, that sort of thing. The fourth one is the yellow line, and this is a very interesting concept. It's a concept I got. So I think I learned this on the course, and I'm not really sure of the course itself. I've just always had this idea of the yellow line in my head for a very long time, and it came, I think, in the course, the instructor kind of explained how when you're driving, you have this yellow line in between the road that kind of connects, that kind of shows you the divisions between this side and the other side. But something he tried to mention was how, that yellow line is on the road, and you could literally trace that yellow line from one town to the other. The idea behind the yellow line is that between one shot to the next, you always want to have a connecting element, one element that is connecting between the first shot and the second shot. In some cases, you can have a connecting element throughout the entire shot, but I would usually say that you take breaks. And I have a beautiful piece by Buck for the New York, I think it was a New York poster, and I think it does a really good job at explaining. Sorry, I kind of go back. It does a really good job at explaining what I mean when I say the yellow line. And I would like you to just take a look at some of the elements and how they from one shot to the other, they kind of have that one singular element that they are always referencing. So if you start out, you can see, you can see that at the beginning, we can see the boat, but that boat, I think I have to figure out a way to work on this. Yeah. So you can see that boat is still very much referenced here, but not just only the boat, the birds themselves, right? And as we move towards the scene, you can see how you can also we see the birds here again. So we don't see the boat, but we can still see the birds, right, in this shot. And this kind of sells my point where I say you want to have connecting elements because it kind of helps the story stay intact. And when I play to you kind of understand what I mean. Yeah, awesome. Really awesome stuff. Yeah, the New Yorker Festival. Very, very, I can't believe I forgot that. But like I said, I love this piece a lot because there are a lot of places where you can see connecting elements. Like here, we have the train moving, but once we move into the next shot, we literally still see that train, right? So the idea of the yellow line is basically having a connecting element between shots, because this allows you to keep the story intact. It doesn't allow you, it's easier to keep your audience when you have that connecting element than when we have very distinct frames. Now, this is not to say that you cannot create idea or cannot create a project without having connecting elements. It is just a stronger way to tell a story when you do have one. My fifth lesson is storyboard everything, and I wish I had learned this from the beginning. One of the biggest mistake I think I made as a beginner was just always going straight into design, into animation. I would not design anything. I would just no storyboards, no design, no nothing, and I would just go straight into the animation. And what that usually leads to, and if you are familiar with that, if you've ever experienced that, is it just leads to a lot of frustration. When you don't storyboard stuff, you are more likely to get frustrated, whether you like it or not, because when you are animating, and please don't get me wrong, it's not to say that it's not a possibility where you don't storyboard. I would say that it's better to do storyboard everything, but the possibility where I talk about there not being a possibility where you don't storyboard is saying that if you're really experienced and you know what you're doing, you can skip storyboarding, right? Because in some cases these are things that you've gotten used to over time. The process is something you've gotten used to. But as a beginner, you don't want to skip the storyboarding step because you are more likely to get confused when you are animating, if you don't have a storyboard, because you can start working on something and realize, okay, this concept isn't working well. But these are the things that you could easily have done in your storyboarding stage. I personally break down my storyboard into two types. I usually have like a raw storyboard, which is usually like very ugly and all. And then I have a much more refined storyboard. My rough storyboard usually is for the story itself. What this means is that I'm definitely not going to be trying to figure out what the design looks like when I'm doing my rough storyboard. It's kind of like, does the story work or the story not work? That's really why it's called the storyboard, right? And like I said, it's very, very important that you, as a beginner, that you especially this rough side of things, that you spend your time in your storyboard process, like figuring out story, not figuring out design. And I think there's a lot I see that a lot of beginners that have reached out to me is they're looking at their storyboard, and the first thing they're trying to do is try to figure out this design in the storyboard stage. Your storyboard stage is really to figure out the story, not necessarily the design. And then you can start figuring out the design when you get to like your star frames later on. My sixth lesson was the difference between a mood board and a reference board. Usually my mood board were really reference board. Like I would literally take items or renders or images or videos, projects that I wanted my work to look like exactly, and I would put that and say that's my mood board. And that's in fact, not only is it wrong, but you are most likely not to, like, there's a high chance you're not going to create anything that is in quotes original or very personal, right? And so the difference between a mood board and a reference board is that your mood board is really to convey the mood of your story. And when, like, I think Andrew mentioned this in his session, he mentioned how you want to, you go to stock imagery sites, or you go to, some of the people you love, some of your favorite motion designers or artists or designers, right? And just like kind of get references, not just references, but basically get images that kind of fit the mood of the project you're trying to create. However, a reference board is more like collection of images that you would want to reference a particular part of it, not necessarily the whole thing. So this is a very random mood board. Don't pay attention to what it looks like, but this is a mood board I put together, and you can see from this mood board that you can already kind of tell the kind of mood of, like, if you were going to imagine what this project was going to look like, you can already kind of imagine what that looks like, with the iridescent material, landscape, mostly iridescent. You can see a lot of like gradient stuff around, and with the rocks, you can kind of imagine what there's a lot of places you can go, but you can imagine what the mood would necessarily feel like. However, when we're looking at a reference board, the reference board should kind of like identify some key things. So for example, you might want to have a few references for lighting. You may want to have references for your camera angles. If you have a particular object, like for example, a crystal that you want to reference directly, you could go and get references for that, whether they are photographs or in some. I would try as much as possible to avoid direct renders when it comes to object reference, but in some cases they may be very, very useful. So things like composition and landscape. Here I have like 3 images per reference, but in reality, usually this could span up to like 5-10 images that I would put together. And this kind of like guides how I would. So when I'm looking, I'm saying, okay, I like the composition here. I'm trying to have a composition that looks like this, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look like this. And that's something you want to try to avoid when you have a reference board, is not making some, especially when it comes to composition, you don't want to make something that looks exactly like what you've referenced. You just want to kind of pick ideas from them. At the end of the day, yeah. So that's basically the difference between a mood board and a reference board. And I think since I started doing this, it has really helped. I really pushed like the way I work on stuff. The seventh one is super easy, and this is really targeted towards beginners, if I'm being honest. The reason being that when I started out in motion design, I would just press F9, right? And I think a lot of us have been in that situation where we just press F9, boom, we are literally done, like no other thing again, right? However, I think it was a Grayscale Gorilla video I was watching, and then he mentioned something about a super ease, and since then, right, I've always used the super ease. Now, it is not something that you would use all the time. They're definitely more complex animation, but when it comes to things like moving in, moving out, these easings can help you a lot. So the first one is this very dramatic, curve, right? Usually you most people would have, like, if you use your F9, if you're a beginner, you just have like, very simple curve, right? There's nothing extra about it. However, I always like when I'm thinking about my super is to have this, especially at the end of the keyframe, right? To have this very exaggerated easing. I really use this all, like, for almost. I still use it today, because if I want to do something as just move something into the frame or move it out, this usually just does the job for me. I can see from the example I have here that yes, it starts out really fast, but you can see how it slows in, and this really allows the audience to kind of like grab what is really going on. Both sides of things, really confused about what type of easing you should use. You can just literally copy and paste this and use in your work. Like I said, this is not a solution that you can use for everything, but in very, very simple scenarios, this will work efficiently, and you would have a very, very smooth animation all around. The eighth lesson I learned was file management, and I will not lie that this one hit harder than most. So when I started out motion design, earlier in my career, I would always like have my files everywhere. I would have music in my download folder. I would have maybe like a vector file that I created in one other folder, save stuff anywhere, and like really anywhere I liked. And I quickly learned the repercussion of this quickly started showing itself. So for example, I would accidentally delete a file, and then when I come back to the file to edit it, I realize that this file is missing. So I start looking for where that file is, and I really don't know where it is. So either I moved the file or I deleted it, and so I may have to re-download it, or something similar. I have to find it or recreate it, if I put it that way. So with my file management, really, the lesson I learned here, and there's really not much to it, if I'm being honest, is that you always want to have all your files in one place. You really want to just have your assets in one place, your shots in one place, everything in one place. And I would always advise that you don't, if you're going to use the same music for one project, for another project, for example, please don't reference it in that project folder, duplicate it and have it separately in that folder or that project, because down the line, you never know when you might just want to pick that folder and move it to another computer. And if it is not arranged properly, or if the file is linked and it's not in that folder, then you may have a hard time finding it, or you may have to go back and recreate some of those things. The ninth lesson is name, color code, and trim your layers. I cannot stress enough. I think Ben Marriott has, I think this one, he has really ingrained it in if you watch Ben Marriott, you kind of understand what I'm talking about. He says name your layers. But I think the way I learned this lesson was very different. Because when you don't name, at first, when you start out, especially when you're doing very simple animation, you don't have a lot of layers. So you may have like maybe 20, 10 layers. You may be to find what you're looking for. But I remember my first production where I had an After Effects file, and I had over 200 layers. And I literally had masks that were named shape layer 168, shape layer 158. And I'm just there, losing my mind because I have to turn off layers and turn them back on. With design, right? This is something that design, like when I mean design, I mean visual design, imagery. You can get away with that because there's no pressure for time, right? But here, because you might want to do like maybe a big change or something, knowing exactly where that layer is very important. I think that it should be a scene, especially in motion design, not to name your layers because there's a lot of trouble that I can get into for that. Color coding your layers. This I learned while I think this was when I started working at an agency, and it was really the first time I started seeing people color code layers. I would always leave like my text layer red or my shape layer blue, but I started seeing how other people would group scenes. So if scenes were together, or if a particular let's say a particular animation or illustration was together, they would literally color code them the same thing. That way, finding them wasn't going to be very hard for them at the end of the day. Like you could just easily say, oh, it's purple, and then just go and look for it. And last one is stream your layers. Don't leave very long layers that go from the end of the beginning of the timeline to the end. Wherever your keyframe stops or wherever that animation stops, trim your layers there. It allows you to find where the beginning and end of animation is, and it's just easier for you to manage your layers that way. Number 10 is that as a motion designer, you are the entire pipeline. So where this lesson really hit hard for me was when I was trying to create a particular type of effect and I couldn't figure it out. And I was really asking myself, how could I figure it out? So I think I went to YouTube. I started searching like a bunch of motion graphics tutorials, and I really didn't find anything until I came across a cinematography video because it was kind of like a camera move. And I came across a cinematography video on YouTube, and it kind of explained exactly what I was looking for. And it was the first time I actually realized that, okay, I didn't really know that cinematography was something that you could really apply, to motion design as well. And so what I'm going to list here are why I consider the 7 key areas of motion design that you should be aware of. I mean, you shouldn't try to learn all of it at the same time, but you should be very much aware of. So it's design, animation, storytelling, cinematography, compositing, editing and color work, and then sound design. These are, personally, I think these are the 7 key areas that I discovered that at least every single time I work, I kind of find myself in one of these areas. They are very, very, for me, I would say, and I think if you're a beginner, you should kind of consider this as well. They're very, very key areas for me when it comes to motion design. I consider the first 3 very important: design, animation, storytelling, because you can get away with a lot of things if you don't know cinematography or compositing or editing or sound design. You may get away with a few of those things. And even when you're doing design, some of these ideas may creep up as well, right? When you talk about cinematography, for example, cinematography really is concerned with the type of lens of cameras you're using, type of shots, whether it's a wide shot or an up close shot or a medium shot. This was a very, it changed. I think learning cinematography really changed the way I saw motion design, and it was very insightful for me. So I consider it important, but I feel like there's a lot you can get away with if you just know design, animation, and storytelling. 11th lesson is that as a motion designer, you are a storyteller, whether you might like it or not. At the end of the day, whether you have an abstract idea or a very realistic idea, or an idea that's grounded in real life, as I would say, you're still telling a story, right? And you would want to have have a story structure, if I put it that way. I want to have a very defined story structure. So I took a course, I think last year or this year, I think it's this year, by Sun Yi, and it was like the art of storytelling. And some of the story structure he laid out in that course really changed the way I saw how I should structure my stories or structure my project or my videos. The first one is the hook, right? This is basically a scene. You know, it could basically be like a second, 2 seconds that catches the attention of your audience. Like you want to have it at the beginning, you want to be able to catch the attention of your audience. This may be in form of this, it may be form of the script itself, but it could also be in form of the design itself, right? You want to have like a very flashy design at the beginning, or very energetic design at the beginning, just to catch the attention of the audience. Then we have the premise. The premise really just means that you want to identify to a relatable struggle of the audience. If you're working with client project, this may make a lot more sense, but with personal project, it might be like, okay, well, how do I identify with the struggle? It could be a personal struggle. Like I said, even if the idea is abstract, you still want to have a structure. So you may be talking about a struggle in an abstract way, right? You might be trying to identify with a relatable struggle in an abstract way. The third part after the premise is the trigger, and this is basically what triggers the audience to find the solution. What exactly causes the audience to say, okay, I'm done. I need to find a way to get out of this struggle, right? And then we have the outcome, which is where you now introduce the solution to the audience struggle. We then have the lesson. This is where you show them where they were and where they can be, right? So it's kind of like a comparison. This is part of your story where you want to compare between where the struggle that they're facing and where they can be if they use this solution. And then finally, we have the conclusion, which is basically a call to action or a pitch that tells them what exactly to do. And my final lesson is that you should experiment. I don't think I can stress this enough. Most of the things I've learned, most of the things I've figured out, most of the ideas that I even come up with is as a result of experimentation. And why I say I can't really stress this enough is because I find myself trying to figure out how something is done, maybe by just looking at the project and just trying it out myself. And then I watch a workshop like this, or I watch a tutorial online, and I realize like, oh, this person is doing exactly what I figured out myself, right? This is a very key part. Always experiment, explore, right? Try out new things. There's a reason why you have this. The software is a tool, and it can do a bunch of things, like the iterations of things that you can do as a motion designer, as a designer, is limitless. So whatever tool you're using, whether it's a tool, whether it's After Effects, Cinema 4D, Blender, try as much as possible to always experiment. Like try weird things. Like yes, it will look weird, it might not even make sense, right? But try weird things and experiment as much as possible. So that's really all for my lessons. Thank you very much, and that would be all. Hello? Can anybody hear me? Hi, Susanna.
I think she's having network issues. But yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much. Can you hear the echo? Give me a sec. Let me get my headphones. One sec. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Awesome.
Awesome. That was like a really great session. It was really, really packed. I think we all kind of like learned a lot, and you went from like it was so in depth. I don't even know where to pick from, but I have a few questions that I'm
Right,
hoping is on people's minds when they kind of like watch, when they kind of listen to you. And
yeah.
the first one is, how do you apply sound to motion in your current process?
Interesting. So I usually work with a sound designer, but sometimes I do sound myself. And there are only like two ways for you to approach sound. The first one is really you could have a music. So when it comes to you could have a sound that you're already inspired by. So you might just listen to something and feel like the vibe of that sound, and you're like, you know what, I like this and I want to use it, right? And then the other one is where you build the entire animation, the entire project first, and then you send it to the sound designer, or you do sound design yourself, and then you kind of like, okay, start working on the music based on like the mood you were trying to create. So it's kind of like a two-way thing. So there's some projects where, like I said, I would just listen to music, and I'll be like, I like this, or I could send the idea to the sound designer. He could send me like a track, and I'll be like, okay, this is really cool. Let's use that. But in most cases, I think it's 50-50 if I'm being honest. Most cases is like you done with the animation, then you send it to the sound designer. With client work, you may want to at least send like a sample sound first, because what I realize is there have been a situation where I've sent the music later on and they are not really satisfied with the music, and so there's just like this whole process, like this whole long process trying to figure that out. So that's really how I would approach sound, especially my own process.
That is really good and really clear. Someone has a question, Kev Williams, and I'm reading. He says, and I quote, for your storyboarding, how do you go about it? What tools do you use? And how do you arrange each scene on the software? And a quick show would be, it puts it in a bracket, a quick show would be appreciated. Just your setup for storyboarding.
So I currently don't this computer was really just for this presentation because it really has a good camera. However, I use Storyboarder. I will try to maybe bring it up. I would just show you. But for my raw storyboard, I use Storyboarder. I think it has, since I found out about Storyboarder, it has still been like it has still been the best tool I've found. And what it does, I really wish I could show it like a demo. That would have been really cool. But one of the reasons why I like to, if you look at this, you can see how simple the tool. It almost looks like you're looking at Procreate, when you're creating this storyboard. But what I really like about Storyboarder is how when you're storyboarding, it really wants you to focus on storyboarding. And so if you spend too much time on a particular scene, it literally tells you that you spend so much time, or that's enough, go to the next frame. Because it kind
Can
of
you drop a
understands
link to Storyboarder?
Yes, I can, sure.
But go on, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Sure. But yes, it literally tells you when you should stop. And the reason why I like this is it really wants you to focus on the story, not focusing on design, like I mentioned earlier. Like you really want to just get into the nitty-gritty of things. And so when you start noticing yourself becoming too like, okay, I want to figure out what this is, it stops you. Now, I also like it as well because the tools are very crude. So because you don't have things like snapping, for example, or maybe there's straight lines and all of that, but there's no snapping or like shapes or anything. So you can't start fiddling around with shape, maybe a circle or a sphere or like the pen tool. Yeah, it's just down to the storyboard. So this is basically what I use for every storyboard I do. I don't think I can't remember like what I used to do storyboard before Storyboarder, but this is really what I use for all of my storyboards.
This is really interesting. For me, I just use Photoshop and just call it a day. But yeah, thank you very much for that. One question I have is one last question I'm going to be asking is, it's a very obvious one, but what's more important, design or animation?
Like I said, it's very obvious, but it's really design. I don't think I can stress that anymore. And I think even through my presentation, I've mentioned that a couple of times. Animation is important as well, but I realized that when you have really good design and you apply very simple animations to them, just moving something from left to right, panning your camera, orbiting, just simple things like that, it really enhances what you've already done. So design will always come first for me with motion design and then animation later. But that doesn't mean that animation is important. That doesn't mean animation is a very, especially when it comes to storytelling for motion design, is really animation is where you can really do that. So um, as you, I would say that if you're thinking of where to put your focus more in, put your focus more with design, and then you can start adding more, like you can start improving your animation as you go along the way.
Thank you very much, Ebube, for this. I really appreciate you taking your time to share everything that you have with us. So right now, Susanna and Lankai are going to come up. She's going to introduce Lankai, and yeah, I'm just going to shut up my mouth and focus on handling the stream. Thank you very much, Ebube.
Yeah,
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
you too. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, Lankai is up. Hi.
Good morning, good evening.
How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm fine.
So, thank you for being here today. Quick introduction.
All
Lankai
right.
is a motion designer from Ghana, and he has come all the way here, to share with us his process, share with us what he really thinks of how he has navigated doing motion designing so far. So thank you so much, Lankai, for joining us. If you are still here, we are so excited and happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us too. You have questions, you have anything, please use the comments section, the box. We're going to read it out to Lankai after he's done with his session. Also, you can tap in the description to click the link to join Batch Motion Discord channel. It's a community we're building for motion designers. So resources, tips, everything, literally, especially if you're up and coming, will be there. And you can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We also here subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Thank you so much once again. So Lankai, I'm just going to say over to you. Take it away.
All right. So, hello. So, the way we are starting this one for today is I've decided that I'm coming to do my presentation on, I'm going to do my presentation on keyframing and easing, which is something that me, I see a lot of people like they are not doing it well. So me, I thought, okay, let me come and try to guide people in the right way. So that's the topic for this part. So then, as for me, I'm Lankai Lamte, my motion and 3D designer for. I'm working with at Activity Studios and then Dell's Media Group. You probably don't know them, but we move. And then my socials, my Twitter and my website are on the left. And then just in case you don't know me, yeah, here's my reel. Here's my reel, so you can watch and just so you can get an idea of how I do. So my reel is here. Once it loose, yeah. So here's my reel. So yeah, that's my reel for those of you who do not know me. So we can start. So let's start with the very, very much basic, which is what is keyframe and easing. So in animation, keyframes is essentially like the important like blocks to where that the animation starts. So like in between is where all the animation happening. So the building blocks. And on the other hand, easing is like is manipulating the speed or the of the parameter you're animating. So whether it's going to this part of the key, this part of the in between of the keyframe faster or slower. So I'm going to show you each part of how each part of the keyframe. So almost every single feature when it comes to keyframing. So I've set up this practice scene very fast. So say you set up a keyframe for this ball to go from here to here. So now that you have, so let me make it go in the center. So now that you have this, you can see that this is when you have not done anything, it looks very linear. So this is like pure linear keyframes and everything. And so there's a few things you can do for first of all. So first you can go to the first thing is hold keyframes. So hold keyframes are like if you want to start, so if you want to, so instead of there being an in between for the animation, for hold keyframes, it goes from the first parameter to the second parameter as soon as the second parameter keyframe. So if you want to do like stop motion, all those things, that's what you need hold keyframes for, which is very useful for some things like for different types of animation. And next up, there's the main one that I want to talk about, which is easy ease, which you can also use F9 and you have the graph editor. So me, I use the speed graph a lot because I just find it easier to see which part's going fast. So you can see when you start with the easy ease, the higher it is, the faster, the steeper the line. So it means that it's steeper at these sides. So it means it will animate faster at these sides and then be slower at the ends. So you can pull this, so you can select IPA, you can pull. If you pull this here, it means it'll be faster at the beginning and slow down at the end. And if you do this, if you push this one all the way to the left, it means that it's no wind up. It starts fast at the beginning and then slows down at the end. And if you bring them two together, it means that very slow in the beginning and then very fast at the end, like that, which is the building block for every single animation you need. Without this, without this, it won't go well. So that's for the start. So going on to the problem that I've seen a lot, which was the I was looking at some motion designs for batch contesting, and I saw from my experience that a lot of people, they were not using the if keyframes correctly. Like it could have been better if they understood how to make keyframes like how to make the keyframes flow together, has made the keyframes flow together and make it look satisfyingly smooth and everything. So I'm not like cherry picking here, but I've picked some examples which like I would say demonstrate my problem quite a bit. So for example, we have like is the concept is very good, but the execution, like it could do with some work. Like for example, like the physics doesn't work, like the keyframe, how does the ball fall, not bounce, those kind of things. So I just want to like help with making an example with that. So let me try making a situation like that, for example. So let's say you have you want to have a ball go to the left and then go to the right. So you would do something like this. Usually you would have so you usually just or this is from what I've seen on something. So you have the ball go to the left and then the ball goes to the right, and then you just easy ease and then you're finished. But then as you can see, it's it's not animated enough for it's not animated enough. Like it stops in the middle, all those things. So like even if you add like a secondary thing like oh, and you also want to see that falls the ball also falls here to down like this. Yeah, let me even say the ball also falls down to here like this, and then you just keep the easy ease like that. Then you get like some very awkward motion like that. So I came to come and help you people, come help with like how to deal with that kind of thing. Like see how like so me usually my concept on every motion design that I do is that no matter what no matter what you do, at least one thing in your design has to be moving. Well, so that's my principle. So whether foreground object, background object, doesn't matter. It just has to be moving. So usually you can achieve this with I my my best what's the word, advice for anyone is to use nulls, because nulls can save or your animation by far. Like for example, say you have this where you have the ball like stopping in the middle, doing like that, all that. You can instead have the ball. So you have your first animation. So let's go a different style. So you can have your first animation. You can have the ball. So you have it big, and then so you have the ball big, like 500, and then you decide, oh, I want to zoom it out. I want it to be fast when it zooms out. So then, so what you can do is make it so that with the speed graph, value graph is good as well, but it's a bit more complicated. So its uses it's very useful, but in some instances it's overcomplicates things. So you say you have like the ball going down first. So then once the ball goes reduces, say you want the ball to jump up and then fall down. So what you don't do is that what you don't do is like as soon as the ball finishes the scale and then now it goes up. That's not it's not the best thing to do. So it will look something like this. Like that is not good. What you need to do is you need to see like even the fact is scale and position, they're different things. So you can overlap them. So say that halfway through this scale animation, halfway through this, you can make it so that the position starts animating. Because once you do this, because also once you do this, there's no breaks in between your animation. So and you want the peak to be like almost right where the scale ends. So you have your first one. So you can put so you're trying to get it to line up with this one, at least this bottom end scale. So have that and then you can line it up a bit. So now if you play it, it even looks way better than if the ball just stops and goes up. So now if you can adjust it like okay, we want it to go to the left like earlier, like that. So now you have that, and you want it to go down. Usually, what people will do is just make another keyframe at the they'll just make another keyframe at the end of this, and then just easy like this. But then yeah, I mean yeah, and then so then it will look something like this, which is not the best. So like they'll have it like this, and then it looks like that, which it's not smooth. It's like it has to like at least obey some physics. So instead of doing this on the same layer, what I would do is you create a new null layer, which you can name the circle null. Because always name your layers. Then let me just change the color. So once you have the null, you can bring it to the same anchor point as your ball, then parent link it. Now, once you do that, you can apply the same principle here where you can start the animation before the main animation ends. So say you have it like when it's this amount up, or yeah, you have it like when it's this amount up, you can start the ball falling down, which would look like this, and then you can move it to where you think it would be good. So like here, so that it looks continuous, like it doesn't look like a stop start. So then once you ease it so that it starts at the end of the frame, you can have like that. But this one is not going down far enough. So if I push it further down like that, and then I start this later. Yeah. So now you can see it's one continuous motion, which looks much more satisfying than if it was stop, start. If I had just put the keyframes right next to each other. This is what like would help save a lot of work. So like it looks way much more smoother. And me personally, what really helps things like this is the echo effect. So echo, if you don't know what it is, it's basically replays the effect multiple times. So for example, you can pick them like the time. So minus 0.33 seconds means like so it will play the clip 0.33 seconds before it happens, which means that, and you can show the amount of time. So if you want to play 60 times 0.33 seconds before it plays, it means that it will do, so it do that. And so, but usually the best setting would be like minus 0.001, and then number of echoes is like 40. Then once you do that, it will make a nice trail so that it looks more expression like that. So you can, and once you have this trail, even you can customize it even more. Like for example, once, because now you have smudge frames, and now once you have these smudge frames, it means that you are basically free to do whatever you want behind them, because since they have smudge frames, things can come from behind them and will look normal. So let's say I want to have, let's say I have this ball going up. As it's going up, I want a cube a square to come. So now what I can do is, yeah, so now what I can do is, if I if I have this circle, I can reduce the scale. So if I have this circle, it means that if I start, if I put it behind the trail, behind the circle, behind the trail, everything, I can have it a different color. So let's say I make the circle black, because like the echo, it gives me smudge frames. Basically means that free space to come, like for anything to pop out. So you can just create anything from it, whether you want it or not. So let's say I want this circle to rotate up like this. So have my this is my so I have my starting keyframes, and then usually I would have, as it's in the apex of the up animation, which would be here, then I would have this. So as it's here, then I will bring it up, then maybe add like a small rotation. So for like animating this rotation, for example, usually it will be better to use the value graph, because when you use it, so usually when you're having an object rotate in mid-air, usually it rotates faster at the start, then slower in the middle, and then faster at the end. But with the speed graph, it's very difficult to do. But with a value graph, all you can do is just bring this one up, because as you bring it steeper, it animates faster, and then for this side as well. So now if I solo the layer, now if I look at this, oh wait, I need to animate it down as well. So let's have this, and then I'll make it go down as well. And then I will animate this very fast. So, but usually with position, speed graph is usually better with nulls. And so I animate this like this. So this part means that as soon as it appears, it moves up, and then it slows down at the end. And then this one is as soon as, like, as the right at the end is when it speeds up. So I have something like this. So I have to extend the rotation. So now if I play, it will rotate fast at the middle, it will rotate fast at the start, but it won't rotate but it will barely rotate at the middle. Let me fix the keyframes. So now if I have this like that, so now it looks much more realistic than just a ball going up and down. And then if you feel you can add more rotation, like you can add plus 180, so that it rotates more like that. And then if you want to, you can add echo again, which would usually my settings are minus 0.001, 40 echoes, and then my echo operator is minimal. So then if I turn this off, and then I and then get my timing correct. Yeah, so now we can see that, yeah, so now we can see that it's a very smooth, buttery, like no stop, no start, no stop in between the animation. And it's like that's why usually my go-to effects for anything, echo, which is almost as long as is you're not having a gradient or a texture, echo is a really good effect because so instead of and then yeah, it's really good. So I have prepared some examples of like how can use like different nodes and things to create a better like a smoother work as well. So this work is by my friend Akam. So let me pull it up very fast. Yeah. So he's by my friend Akam. He's a very good motion designer, and he made this project. I think during last winter or something. But yeah, using he sent me the project file for this, but you can see if I full screen it. uh, Yeah, so you can see if I full screen it. Yeah, so if I full screen it, even the swinging rotation over here, if you were to do this in regular After Effects without nulls, like you can attach a null above the circle so that, so let's say the null is here. If you have the null here and you rotate it, this is the pivot. So once you have the pivot, basically, so once you have the pivot, it will swing around. So pivot here, and you have this. If you rotate it this way, the ball will not like rotate like circular. It will rotate around the pivot, which how you get swinging motion. And then and then you could get another null, which you can use for this down animation while it's still pivoting. Then this felt really good. So then after this, see how the triangles and the squares are more rotated. So like even you can see that what like as soon as this part starts, yeah, what's it called? Even for this part, like he's using the nose. And there's even another project like this one in interconnections, which is a really good project. I always use it for inspiration. Even in this project, you can see that like everything is overlapping each other. So let's full screen. Uh, yeah, so you can see like the way this starts. He has the rotation circles with like he starts the rotation circles, brings them closer. So usually you would have one null for the circles rotating like this. So one null in the middle, these circles pivoting around it, and then once the circles get closer, he brings in another null, which scales out the circles and transitions them to that. Because once you have the easing and the like easing and nulls, so even for this one, for example, he's having the circles rotate around this, and he's using a different null to bring the circles inside. So he's overlapping the animation to bring the like for this one he's has a different one. Then he starts the null, brings the null down, so and then he finishes that, and then yeah. So yeah, let me give you an example for using nulls for using keyframes for transition. So say let's say we are going back to this. We have this animation. If we have this and then we bring so if we have this, yeah, so we have this apex right here, which is this. This is the apex. So since this as this apex, this circle is moving at its fastest or almost apex. If we if we just um, delete all the layers past this circle, which would be this and this, and we don't need a null. So if we delete all the layers past this, we can transition to another scene and we'll make a match cut because it looks good. So say we yeah, so we bring this And then, so let's say we change the background color, so we invert the colors. So we break this gray, then for the background, instead make this yellow, like I'm just gonna use this. So we make this yellow. Now we can see that because the keyframes are the apex and the easing matches each other, we can see that it makes a smooth, like there's no you look at the transition and it looks like it doesn't look it looks natural. Like even though the colors are inverted, it doesn't change like, and then we can bring the square back. Even though the colors are inverted, it still looks good because the easings are perfectly matching each other, which means that which means that they transition easier. So yeah, that's basically. So I have the conclusion here, which hopefully you understand how important keyframing is to your animation. So you like maybe for your next project, you could try to make sure that you should try to make sure that at any point in time there's at least one object moving in the animation, which I think is really important because when it comes to animation, if the person is not looking, if something stops, if everything stops, the person will lose interest. So once they lose interest, they won't look again. So you have to make sure that at least one thing is the center of attention during your animation, and then also using no layers to overlap your animations so that it looks smooth, it doesn't break, it doesn't stop, like it looks fine, and then using keyframes to create match cuts or other kinds of transitions with flowing them so that at the apex of the so that at the apex you can swap you can use a match cuts, and then understanding what type of easing. So you have the fast at the beginning when it's steep here, you have the fast at the end when it's steep to the right side, then you can also have it converge so that it's fast and it's extremely fast in the middle. And then you can also utilize which can like echo and spheres, which can basically reduce the amount of work you have to like bring something. Like you don't have to do any animation to bring like a square into the scene. You can just hide it behind the echo and then bring it out. So which is really good. So yeah, any questions?
That was a really good presentation, Lankai. Yeah, I learned so much. Like it was just so much going on. Like went from keyframes, talking about physics a little bit, to showing us really cool motion. I have a couple of questions that I kind of wrote down.
All
Give me
right.
a sec. Let me pull them up. So you mentioned physics. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of my motion design just results around using circles. So what's it called? So when it comes to like the animation, physics is very important because with circles is probably the easiest thing to animate because you look at them almost every day. You understand how they move, like how one will bounce when one doesn't bounce. For example, yeah. So for example, say I have this. Let me get another composition right now. Uh, okay, so say that I have this. Yeah, so I have this new composition. So I'll use to explain. So say I have this, and I want the ball to bounce around the scene. So in using like say I have a ball with me, and I just throw it around the room, and I just see like how once it goes from this wall, like the angle that it flows off is almost the same, then it does not lose like it barely loses momentum until it reaches a point where like it can't bounce anymore. So let's say I made this composition much smaller, so 500 by 500, so that it's like a small cube, and I reduced my circle size like this. Now say I want to animate this circle going from here, bouncing around, and then dropping here. So usually what you do is, so you start your keyframe here, outside of the screen. Then now Usually when you're animating bouncing, the keyframes you barely ease them. You just have to be very close because it moves fast and so you barely see the in betweens. That's why when you're like animating a bounce with like using normal fields, like you don't see it, so it's very close. So you have the next one bounce. Then since this one is traveling a longer distance, it means that the keyframe may be a bit longer. So then this now is going here, and now from here, because it's going traveling a short distance, you'll go a short distance, it will go here, and then a bit of a longer distance will go here, and then at this point, when you want it to like go to the center, you can be a bit more unrealistic. So let me just fix the parts right now. So when you want it to like bounce um to the middle, so I want it to I'll show you how to do it. So you have this, you'll go to the middle like this. So usually at this point, I would not animate on the square layer anymore. Usually what I would do is, like I said before, I would get a new null. So new null, circle null. Let me change the color. So then now I bring it to the anchor point of the circle. Now when I parent link the circle to the null, I can have it animate simpler because now that I'm going to have it like bounce like a loop down. So I'll have it bounce up and then loop down. So let me just get the animation for them. So just the keyframe to the center. Oh, let me, yeah, to the center like that. So we can preview the first bouncing. So now you can see that, okay, this is too slow. So what you can do is if you select all your keyframes in the selection and then you hold Alt, you can extend them. You can extend the time between the keyframes or you can decrease the time. So let me decrease the time between them a bit. Oh, let me decrease the time a bit and then bring this back here. So now let's see. Now it looks like it's bouncing. So now for the chair, like I said before, echo minus 0.001, 40 echoes per second, and then minimum echo. So now that you have this, which is the simple part, now you can animate this part. So usually when so I want it to loop up and then come down. So what I'll do is, so there's this tool in the pen tool area called convert vertex tool, which can allow you to curve a position vector or a path, whatever you want. So now that I've allowed this for curving, I can bring this up and bring this too so that it comes like this. But I'm not done because this is what it looks like right now. It's still not smooth enough. So what I can do is I'm going to separate the dimensions so that I have my X and my Y. And they're already easy ease for me, but I'll just ease them again. Oh yeah, they're already easy ease for me because so once you separate dimensions and you've edited the position vectors, you can't use the speed graph anymore like efficiently. So value graph is what you move to. Now you can see you can animate each part separately. So I have this part. So if I move this, it moves it on the X. So if I do this, it means that it animates extremely quickly on the X and then it animates on the Y. But if I have the Y and then I do this, means that it animates late on the Y. So what I can do with this is that I can animate it so that I have a good arc. So, and you can also affect how much higher it goes and how much lower. So let's say I wanted to go high first and then go X and then go horizontally later. So it means that I can do this, make sure that I have a nice curve and arc. And now on my X, I can make it so that it animates on the X later, like this, a bit straight. Yeah, so animates on the X later, but a bit at the front. So now it looks something like that. And so you can see, so I have it animating quickly on the Y because it peaks fast like earlier, and then it peaks late because and then it peaks later on the X, but the curve is not that much. Then once I have this, since the circle animation is over, let's say I want to make a bounce, I can just make another null. So this is what I say overlapping null. So I make another null. Yeah, I was going null null. But once I have this, I can make it yellow again. And then I can null to the null if it makes sense. So I can parent the node for this circle to I compare it to this. Now once I do this, I can show you how to make like a good ball bouncing. So I separate my dimensions again. I take my Y only, and then I animate it so I want it to bounce this high and then come back at this frame. So I should make it a bit shorter. Yeah. So I have this. So usually when you're bouncing a ball, it's faster. It does not completely stop at the middle. Like there's always like for like such a brief second that you don't notice it that it stops at the middle. So like conservation of momentum that thing. If I if I keyframe the middle parts, you can see that now I have this kind of shape which is like a U. So it means that it's the so if I extend these to the furthest, this means that it's going very fast at the beginning. Then it's so on the U, it's going very fast at the beginning. At the middle, it's plateauing a bit, and then it's as it curves up, it's going very fast in the opposite direction. So now if I play this, I have that. So yeah, that's basically what I mean by like physics.
This is all really, really cool. Like, there's so much depth to your process, and now you think about animation.
Yeah.
This is really cool. It's like crazy thing that you did this in like 5 minutes.
Oh, I've done worse.
But yeah, if you guys have any question, please drop it in the chat. Um, Lankai is still here for the next few minutes, and then we're going to end the stream. Susanna is going to come and take over to end the stream. I'm just I'm just here to ask questions. But this was great so far. We definitely learned so much. Oh
Nice.
yeah, I have a question. It's like, do you recommend using scripts for easing?
I'll be honest. Me, I've been going default After Effects since lockdown. So I've not used any plugins, none of that. Like, I didn't know that you could collect them like that. So, yeah, so I've just been going simple, pure. Because I know people that say like script, oh, yeah, they can help. But me, I don't, I'm not really interested. Because me, once you want, because the scripts they're just making sure you don't understand the like they're simplifying this so you can't like understand like the mechanics of the value and speed graph editors easily, but then once you like understand it, using the graph is way better than using a script because if you can link them, because for example most scripts they don't show you how to use this part of the keyframe velocity, which can show you like
Mm.
how like so say I make this 0, it means that I'm going to have very little animation for at here. So like if they don't show you how to like so the link keyframe so that like your keyframe does not end at a specific time. Like so I would say if you're starting, learn the value graph because like don't use scripts if you're starting, like learn the thing raw and then like once like okay you just need to time save, that's when you can use the scripts and things.
Okay, thank you very much, Lankai. I'm going to add Susanna back to the call so she can end the stream. But yeah, thank you very much. Please, are you going to be providing your project files for us?
Oh, I don't mind.
Yeah, please share it in the batch Discord if you can.
Okay. Yeah,
And the
thank you.
link to join in batch is bit.ly slash join batch. Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to be upping off and letting Susanna end the stream. So
All
yep.
right.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much, Lankai. Thank you for joining us. It was an absolute delight to hear you speak. This has been an experience, and for everyone who is here right now, we're so excited and thankful that you joined. This is the first edition of Batch Workshop, so definitely we'll be having something like this, another edition next month, where we'll also bring more top motion designers and have them come share insights, have them come share things from their experience with us. So definitely become part of our community. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, follow us on LinkedIn, Batch Motion everywhere. Also in the description, there is a link to join the Discord channel. And this has been a ride, guys. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to reach out to any of our guests today, they are all available on social media using the names they used to join. Andrew Marston is on social media as Andrew Marston, ABB RPG, and Lankai. So reach out to them. If you are a fan of their works, definitely. Before I close, I would just like to say that Batch is a community for motion designers, and here we are concerned and particular about your growth as a motion designer. So definitely feel welcome, feel at home here. And let us know if you have any suggestions or any other new thing you want to see in the next edition of Batch Workshops on our social media channels or Discord channel. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to drop off the call now and end the stream. It was amazing doing this with you guys. See you next time.